listening to America First Radio. Here is your host, Paul Adams.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this very special Christmas episode. I want to wish everyone a very Merry Christmas and peace on earth, goodwill to all men. I know it's wishful thinking right now, but we have to fake it till we make it, right? I want to thank everyone for following me here on Twitter and also on Spreaker. Really appreciate your comments. And I want to thank all the people who retweet my tweets and the podcast. And of course, I would like to thank God and specifically Jesus Christ for His atonement for my sins. And I would like to thank also this miraculous movement that has been the election of Mr. Donald Trump. This podcast would not be possible without him and without America. So we have a lot to cover today. I am offering a smorgasbord of sorts. There's going to be appetizers and dessert, lots of dessert, a lot of red meat, white meat. So today I would like to wake you up. We're going to hear a soundbite from a retired general, Wesley Clark. We're going to hear a snippet from Hillary herself. Just a short soundbite to remind us what she sounds like. And from a gentleman by the name of Patrick Clausen, who is a neocon. We'll also cover developments on the national and international stage, and we'll finish off with what I would call heaven's version of Avon Calling. Ladies and gentlemen, we are still in maximum red alert status. And that was the reason for the bell sounds and the intro. More on this later. So, it's official. Trump is in. I'm glad I was wrong. My worst fears did not materialize. Trump lost only to two electors in Texas. One decided to vote for Kasich. The other voted for Ron Paul. And surprise, surprise, now Kasich is calling for Americans to unite behind Trump. And there were 5 electors who defected from Hillary's camp. 3 of them voted for Colin Powell. 1 voted for a Native American by the name of Faith Spotted Eagle. And then there was one other one. So, now that we don't ever have to live through this circus again, I would like to make one recommendation. We could reform the Electoral College so that each state only gets 2 elector votes, or shall we say 3 or 4 or even just 1. The number really doesn't matter as long as it's an equal number, in order to have parity, in order to have all the states on an equal playing field, just as is the case with the Senate. Each state gets 2 senators. And we could call it instead the equalizing vote. And then we could also eliminate the need for people to act as electors, because after all, a vote is a vote. Just tabulate the votes electronically. What's wrong with that idea? And that would eliminate the death threats, the bribing. Who needs that kind of harassment? Who needs that kind of drama when you're an elector? And how about shortening the transition period to 30 days and removing it from the Christmas season to, say, somewhere between February and March? After all, in the old days, the president took the oath of office and then started presiding on March the 4th. And after all, America is the beacon of freedom, a beacon of progress and invention, and sometime reinvention. So I'm all for streamlining and simplifying. It's not over until it's over. The rats are cornered now more than ever, and I still think their attempt to derail the election was a shot across the bow by the globalists. They're not done. George Soros, his lifetime ambition is to bring down America. And as Mr. Carmine Zozora on Twitter said, he said, the battle is over, now the war begins. And it could begin on Inauguration Day. Here's how the perfect storm looks to me at this point, okay? We have to pull back to 100,000 feet and look at the bird's eye view. The Muslims want a new mufti, the last mufti, who can only manifest himself after a cataclysmic war. The Illuminati agenda, which is also, by some accounts, a Jesuit agenda, is to get the masses to agree to a cataclysmic war and annihilation, and then have them beg for peace and order to bring in a Luciferian reign of Satan. If you read Albert Pike's letters, he outlines the sequence of events leading to the 3 world wars. And as we know, Lucifer has many irons in the fire. He has many leaders at the top of the pyramid. There are even rumors now that Pope Francis will abdicate and surrender the church to Satan. We just heard there was an assassination of a Russian ambassador and also of another Russian diplomat, all within a week. And don't forget, 2 months ago, Russia completed a massive civil defense exercise. It was their biggest ever preparation for something very big. Now, Obama is accusing Russia of a cyber attack, of hacking our elections. And I wonder if there's a connection between him and that little conversation he had back in 2012 when the mic was open and he was leaning over to Medvedev and told him that he would have to wait until he got back in the White House for his second term. I wonder if we are not being played here, if this is maybe some kind of WWE. I wonder if behind the curtains we have somebody who is really calling the shots, somebody like a Vince McMahon. Is this more of a Rubik's Cube than a chess game? I'm beginning to wonder. We'll see. All I know is that the globalists have run out of moves on the American front, and they must now trigger some kind of a chain reaction. Does Trump coming in signify not only the economic overhaul of America, but also a spiritual cleanup as he drains the swamp and gets to the bottom of the spirit cooking and the Pizzagate? If we add up all the vectors from 100,000 feet, the direction we are headed is towards World War III. And I haven't even got into the list of Trump's enemies here. I keep saying, get right with God, stock up on food for at least a few months, if not a few years. Stay on the alert. Wean yourself off the mainstream media. Because to make America great again, we're going to have to purify America. If we don't get rid of the satanic pedophilia, America, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry to say, is toast. If Mr. Trump would only read 2 Chronicles, chapters 26, 28, and 33, you would get a gist of how God operates. He plays no favorites. It doesn't matter what your station in life is, especially if you are a king of Israel, then the onus is much greater. You have a greater responsibility. Much more is demanded of you. I want this out front and center here on this Christmas season. America is one nation under God. It's not a theocracy. Everybody can believe whatever they want to believe. We have the First Amendment. But there are many that are trying to split up this nation, to balkanize it and remove God from the equation. As I've told you many times before, I've had heart problems 2 years ago, a couple of heart attacks. I've had 6 stents, and I don't know how much time I have left. Last week, for example, I had some abnormal chest pains, a bit of angina, and so I have no compunction, no qualms. I don't give a rat's behind about what I have to tell you. I tell it like it is. I have zero problems telling you the way it is. I just want you to promise me one thing. Don't cry for me at my funeral, or I'll never talk to you again. That's to borrow from Laurel Stanley. That's his line. There are many of us right now on the watchtower that are watching. We are scanning the horizon. We are decoding the enemy's intel. But we need more sentinels. We need more sentries, more guards, because we just can't get too complacent here. I've heard that 8,000 National Guardsmen and thousands of police officers will be attending the inauguration in Washington as it goes on lockdown. 800,000 people are expected to pour into D.C., along with a few thousand bikers for Trump. And things could get dicey. Soros is known for his color revolutions, after all, and Hillary and Bill Clinton, along with Tim Kaine's wife, all wore purple at Hillary's concession speech. So it ain't over. The global Marxists want a civil war. They want to see the balkanization of the United States. Do you know, for example, that the Independent Republic of California Party has already established an embassy in Moscow? And why Moscow? Moscow, Russia, of all places? Something fishy there. And I know, look, I get it. A lot of people are going to say I'm fear-mongering, I'm spouting fear porn. Look, all I'm trying to do is get off my duff and connect the dots. Because what we've been doing in the past is the definition of insanity. And if we keep doing this, there will be no more America. So we have to do things a little bit more differently. I'm looking at all this out there in the far and near horizon, and I cannot shut up. I cannot not warn you. I would rather you be over-prepared than for me to stay silent and all hell break loose, and then you blame me for not warning you. And besides, the rats don't really like it when we shine the light on them. They fall back, retrace their steps, and they recalculate their moves when they know that we know. So this Christmas season, get right with God, mend your ways. Lucifer is real. God is real. Folks, if after watching a Luciferian witch like Hillary campaign, lie, if after hearing about Pizzagate and spirit cooking you don't acknowledge the reality of Satan, I cannot help you. I can't say anything more. If you don't think there is a battle between the forces of light and darkness, I have nothing more to add. Except for one thing. Here's what I would like to add. As many of you have noticed, I am a believer in the Bible and also in other scriptures which the Lord has revealed and will reveal in the future. And one of the books that I personally adhere to is the Book of Mormon. I consider it scripture. Now, I cannot prove it scripture logically by the rational mind. The only way you can find out if something is scripture is if you go directly to God and ask Him with a sincere heart. Only He can tell you. I want to make a reference to the Book of Mormon here because, as I've said before, the Lord warns us and He gives us mirrors. He gives us playbooks that others had so that we don't repeat the same mistakes. This is the prophet Mormon talking to his son Moroni. He says, many of the daughters of the Lamanites have they taken prisoners. Okay, this sounds like, kidnapping of children. And after depriving them of that which is most dear and precious above all things, which is chastity and virtue, that definitely needs no explanation. And after they had done this thing, they did murder them in a most cruel manner, torturing their bodies even unto death. And after they have done this, they devour their flesh like unto wild beasts, because of the hardness of their hearts. And they do it for a token of bravery. Oh, my beloved son, how can a people like this, that are without civilization, how can a people like this, whose delight is in such abomination, how can we expect that God will stay his hand in judgment against us? Behold, my heart cries out, woe unto this people! Come out in judgment, O God, and hide their sins and wickedness and abominations from before thy face. I could not have said it better when it comes to Pizzagate and spirit cooking. If Donald Trump does not take the initiative to clean up this mess, America is toast, done, finito. It doesn't matter what else he works on, job creation, trade deals, immigration, Supreme Court, all of that, the Fed, auditing the Fed, cleaning up the drug trade, building a wall. If the pedophilia and the Pizzagate is not addressed, everything is for naught. America is done. Now let's zero in here to ground zero, ground level. We're going to look at some national events. Let's look at the Trump effect. The Dow broke through 20,000 for the first time. I predicted it would do that and also break through 30,000 in 40 years. Gallup polls say that the U.S. economic confidence is highest ever. And if you check the Baltic Dry Index, which measures the cost of ocean freight transportation by Cape-sized freighters, it is now at 926. Now, let's put that in some kind of perspective. Do you know what it was back in the summer of 2008, before the crash? It was at 11,600 thereabouts. And by December 2008, it bottomed out at 670. See, the Dow Jones measures expectations, the confidence that people have in the economy, while the Baltic Dry Index measures economic activity, trade, worldwide trade. And let's take a look at what happened here last week with the Trump administration. Rick Perry was called to be the Secretary of Department of Energy. Mick Mulvaney, who is a fiscal hawk, was called to the Office of Management and Budget. Andy Puzder was tapped as Secretary of Labor. Ryan Zinke as Secretary of Interior. Monica Crowley was tapped as Director of Strategic Communications for the National Security Council. Mr. Trump tapped also Lieutenant General Kellogg as National Security Advisor. He named Vincent Viola as Secretary of the Army. Mr. Trump also tweeted that he met with Carlos Slim Eliu, the great businessman from Mexico. And I also parenthetically think that he needs to meet with Soros as things unfold here. It would be a good idea to neutralize him. Also, Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii's 2nd Congressional District introduced a bill called Stop Arming Terrorists. This brave Congresswoman on December 12th tweeted, "We must stand together and stop our government from assisting the same terror groups we are supposedly trying to defeat." And folks, she is a Democrat. She is a patriot. She does not see America along blue and red divides. Let's forget the two-party duopoly here for a minute, okay? Let's stand together as patriots, and I'm talking to all Democrats out there. We need to realize that without the Constitution, without the Bill of Rights, without law and order, without a border, with terrorist organizations within our borders, we are facing annihilation. We are going to implode just like the Roman Empire imploded. And here's something right out of 1984. We've just learned now that Snopes will be determining what's fake news. You know what that tells me? It tells me that it's a bit like the mafia, the mob establishing their own Better Business Bureau and saying, if you want to come and do business here, you have to go through the BBB, our BBB. We also learned last week that Obama has shut down oil drilling in Alaska and off the New England coast. I wonder how long that will last once Mr. Trump gets in. And on a lighter note, some comic relief here. You have probably seen by now that picture of Mitt Romney and Donald Trump as Mitt retreats, as he exits the meeting with Trump where he was interviewed for the position of Secretary of State. And he has that sheepish grin. And Trump is at the top of the stairs and he's shouting at him. He's got both hands by his mouth and he's telling him something. So I added a speech bubble that says, in your dreams. Now, look, as a Mormon, I am appalled at Romney's conduct towards Donald Trump. Who does that? Who does that? After Trump endorsed him, after they both were on stage in 2012, and Romney just profusely poured out this praise for Trump and how great a businessman he was and how thankful he was for his endorsement and how great his wife was, blah, blah, blah. Then he has the chutzpah, the nerve to call him a criminal and a con man. Come on, Mitt. Come on, what planet are you from? He makes me sick to my stomach when I even just look at him. He and Harry Reid have done nothing to enhance our church's image. They are less American than Russians in my books. And the king trader who sells his soul for any kind of notoriety, any kind of, cashola. He sold out first to Ted Cruz. Now he's selling out to the left. This guy who really gives Mormons a black eye is Glenn Beck, a total flea-infested dirtbag. And I predict Glenn is going to be an asterisk in a year, slightly smaller asterisk than Carly Fiorina. And see, this is where Mormons and Muslims are a little bit different. Why aren't moderate Muslims demolishing the radical hotheads in their midst, in their ranks? Why aren't they worried about their public relations image? But now to round things up, in an interview, best-selling author Ed Klein appeared on Fox and Friends Sunday morning to discuss a shadow government that Obama is creating to undermine Donald Trump, which will kick in on Inauguration Day. And I have to say to Obama, in your dreams. Now, in international news, Brazil has just voted in a 20-year austerity plan. It sounds to me like Greece 2.0. And Aleppo erupted in euphoria to celebrate Christmas as Muslims and Christians united in the city for the first time in 5 years. And the independent Canadian journalist Eva Bartlett confirms that it was the Syrian army with the help of the Russians that freed Aleppo. She also goes on to say that there are no international relief agencies in Syria to confirm or deny military activities. But she confirms that reports of massacres by the Syrian army are staged kabuki theater to demonize Assad, just like they tried to demonize him when he supposedly used chemical weapons on his own people. So why is this relevant? Because this Syrian war is all about a pipeline that Saudi Arabia and Qatar want to go through Syria to supply oil to Europe. But see, to use that as a narrative, you can't get the leverage you want from the masses. So you have to demonize Assad. So they make up all these lies that he has committed war crimes on his own people. In other news, a gunman wearing a suit and a tie shouted Allahu Akbar and shot and killed Russia's ambassador to Turkey just when Turkish-Russian relations were beginning to thaw out. And all we can say right now is that the globalists are going for broke. They're going for helter-skelter. Putin is taking this very seriously. He's telling the terrorists, look, you're about to feel the heat. He told them ISIS will regret for what they have done. This is not a Benghazi. I'm not Obama. And as Russia forces help liberate the Syrian city of Aleppo this week from a 4-year terrorist siege, Washington steps up its threats of cyber war, military force, and other sanctions on Russia. For what? For hacking our election? What proof do they have? There's now proof that it was DHS that hacked into some of the electoral computers. Obama is now recklessly warning that America will respond at a place and time of our choosing. All I have to say is let's hope he stays on the golf course until January 20th. One other tidbit here on the international front, and this is from Benjamin Fulford, and I will warn you, take it with a grain of salt, okay? Because we don't have confirmations, but Benjamin is known for, going on the far side sometimes. He says that one of the most senior members of the cabal behind the atrocities in Syria and elsewhere, a bishop by the name of Javier Echevarria, who was the head of the fascist Opus Dei Vatican organization, those are Benjamin's words, not mine. He was killed last week after he tried to overturn the election of Donald Trump. And the Vatican says he died of natural causes. There are 3 independent sources, he says, one a CIA, a Pentagon, and a bloodline source, saying that David Rockefeller and Nathaniel Rothschild have also been killed last week, and this is not confirmed. Benjamin goes on to say that the Clintons, the Bushes, Senator John McCain, and many other cabal leaders are now under house arrest and are only allowed to step outside under carefully chaperoned circumstances, pending their war crimes trials. Well, we shall see about that. Okay, so let's move into my commentary. For me, Trump is a lot like President William McKinley, who was a protectionist and a non-interventionist. See, McKinley was forced into the Spanish War after the sinking of the Maine. That was the warship that was moored in Havana Harbor. And purportedly, it was a false flag which the yellow press used to demonize Spain and foment this animosity towards Spain and get the American public riled up and ready to fight Spain. And what concerns me here is that Trump may be forced into that same kind of paradigm, same kind of trap, should the shadow government unleash a false flag and then pin it on Russia. Who else to pin it on? And don't think for a minute that the enemy isn't working overtime here, okay, in the back rooms, because everything for them is on the line. After all, they have invested decades into the demoralization of America on every front, economic, political, social, cultural, and it takes a long time to bring that frog to a boil, and just when they thought they had it ready to be boiled, the frog kicks out of the pot. It kicked out of their fascist corporate cauldron. Even during Christmas, they are scheming. These dogs of war, they take no rest, okay? They have no holidays. You can count on it. Don't forget, let's not forget here that back in 1775, even George Washington used that same strategy. He didn't take any time off for Christmas. George Washington crossed the Delaware River in the dead of winter on Christmas Day 1775 on his way to fight the British in Trenton. That was the first skirmish. Now back to contrived wars and false flags. I want you to listen to this neocon, Patrick Clausen. He's the Director of Research at the Washington Institute for Near East Studies. He's a real gem.
I frankly think that crisis initiation is really tough. And it's very hard for me to see how the United States president can get us to war with Iran. Which leads me to conclude that if, in fact, compromise is not coming, that the traditional way of America gets to war is what would be best for U.S. interests. Some people might think that Mr. Roosevelt wanted to get us into World War II, as David mentioned. You may recall we had to wait for Pearl Harbor. Some people might think Mr. Wilson wanted to get us into World War I. You may recall he had to wait for the Lusitania episode. Some people might think that Mr. Johnson wanted to send troops to Vietnam. You may recall we had to wait for the Gulf of Tonkin episode. We didn't go to war with Spain until the until the Maine exploded. And may I point out that Mr. Lincoln did not feel he could call out the Federal Army until Fort Sumter was attacked, which is why he ordered the commander at Fort Sumter to do exactly that thing which the South Carolinians had said would cause an attack. So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war. One can combine other means of pressure with sanctions. I mentioned that explosion on August 17th. We could step up the pressure. I mean, look, people, Iranian submarines periodically go down. Someday one of them might not come up. Who would know why? We can do a variety of things if we wish to increase the pressure. I'm not advocating that, but I'm just suggesting that this is not a either-or proposition. Of, you know, it's just sanctions has to succeed or other things. We are in the game of using covert means against the Iranians. We could get nastier at that.
You see what I'm saying? Nothing can stop them if they want to. Now let's listen to Hillary, and in all fairness, she was answering a question which was put to her, will you attack Iran if Israel is attacked? And this is what she had to say.
And I want the Iranians to know that if I'm the president, we will attack Iran.
Okay, this is the kind of knee-jerk reactions that these people have. You know, they almost want war because war is good for business, for the military-industrial complex. It's good for the banks. They finance both sides of the conflict. And they can control the masses more. They can take our liberties away. You know, they can bring in their social engineering. You know, Hillary, with all due respect, and look, I mean her no harm. From my point of view, if you take all her mendacity away, she is a cute woman. I like her smile, I like her teeth, I like her hair, the way she looks sometimes, you know, her eyes. But she is a bought and paid for globalist sock puppet. I mean, let's face it. She's beholden to the Chinese. She's beholden to Wall Street, Qatar, Saudi Arabia. Everybody wants a piece of the action. You know, America is like the fatted calf that everybody wants a piece of. So let's listen now to Ron Paul. He's a real patriot in my books.
Also, you have like maybe Saudi Arabia vis-a-vis Syria, Turkey. There's a lot of elements out there that want to push things along because they simply don't know what to expect from Donald Trump.
Yes, and that's right. They may do this. It might not be the president's doing. And sometimes, you know, the false flags and the unintended consequences are beyond the control of even a sincere president that would like that not to happen. So it is true. Those things could happen. But I, quite frankly, think it would be the personal belief of Obama that he probably doesn't want to go out with a roaring war going on and making the world a lot less safe. But I wouldn't argue against it, that the impossibility. I think that is very possible. But also the reason why even when Trump is president, there'll be some things out of his control too, and he doesn't like to get pushed around. So if it looks like that we're getting pushed around in the world, his reflexes will be rather quick, and they're not going to be wishy-washy, and so that should concern people as well. is that people never want the war. And the peace candidate, in a way, Trump was more peaceful because he wanted to at least talk to Russia. And I think people, the average person, likes that idea. They know it's very costly and they pay all the bills. But what they have to contend with is part of the deep state that controls the media that builds up the war fever. So they just think of how reluctant the American people were about going into the Middle East. But then there was the war drums beating, and they get converted, and they get scared, and that is what's going on right now. Putin becomes the monster. He has nuclear weapons and all this sort of thing. So I think it's part of the media, a major part of the media that participates in the war propaganda. Yeah. But I believe if the people got to talk with each other, they're not going to get together. Do you think the American people, if you have 10,000 American people and 10,000 Russians get together and say, hey, we ought to have a war here. I mean, this peace is for the birds. And, if we have a war, we can build airplanes. It doesn't happen that way. It happens by governments. And then if the government's not acting right, it's the secret government. It's the shadow government. It's the CIA and the false flags and the accidents that happen. And then the people get angry because if you don't get angry at your enemies, then you're unpatriotic. And we all have to be patriotic. But we can be patriotic and friends too, but unfortunately, and this is why I'm optimistic, is I think the media has been exposed and the government's been exposed. Don't believe the government. I love the fact that 68% of the American people don't trust the government. Probably one of the reasons why Trump won. The military-industrial complex endorses Keynesianism. There's domestic Keynesianism, but there's military Keynesianism. And that's why the weapons are being built. And they build them and throw them away. There's waste. They stop building them. They build aircraft carriers that don't work, and it goes on and on. And if other countries, want to keep building, let them build them. It just takes money away from the mouths of individuals. This whole idea that we can solve all these problems and that our exceptionalism, I think it backfires on us when you go around the world and say, and even if we have good values, my argument has always been that we should exemplify them. We should set a standard. So if we do well and we do better with our free society, maybe other countries would emulate us. Now that's spreading a message, but you can't spread a noble, good, thorough moral message by using force and intimidation and bombs and wars. That doesn't work, and that's what we've resorted to too often.
So if I could summarize everything you just said, answering my question, would that be the Trump doctrine that you would like to see American foreign policy emulate?
Yeah, in a way, sure. If he could become a non-interventionist, that would be great. But the pressures would be too great. I mean, his personality would resist on that. The times that we live in would resist it. The deep state would create a crisis, and I think you even suggested, well, what if something happens even before he's elected? Some crisis is created, and maybe not directly by Obama. Then it overrides all those good instincts of the people, because then it's nationalism and then it's a patriotism, protecting the troops, and don't vote. I mean, even...
Let's not forget, ladies and gentlemen, that America was hijacked by neocons in the past, who, for the most part, were proponents of the Greater Israel Project. They had also hijacked Israel. People like Paul Wolfowitz, Dick Cheney, Don Rumsfeld, Richard Pearl, Douglas Feith, David Wormser, to name a few. We can also point to the Jewish Institute for National Security Affairs, JINSA, whose slogan is "Securing America, Strengthening Israel." So we are not going to be blindsided again into another war with Iran, okay? General Clark even gave us a predictive programming scenario of what was to be unleashed, all these wars. Listen to him here.
What happened in 9/11 is we didn't have a strategy, we didn't have bipartisan agreement, we didn't have American understanding of it, and we had instead a policy coup in this country. A coup. A policy coup. Some hard-nosed people took over the direction of American policy, and they never bothered to inform the rest of us. I went through the Pentagon 10 days after 9/11. I couldn't stay away from Mother Army. I went back there to see Don Rumsfeld. I'd worked for him as a White House fellow in the 1970s. All this is in the book. And I said, am I doing okay on CNN? He said, yeah, fine. He said, I'm thinking about it. He says, I read your book. And he said, this is a book that talks about the Kosovo campaign. And he said, I just want to tell you, he said, nobody's going to tell us where or when we can bomb. Nobody. He said, I'm thinking of calling this a floating coalition. What do you think about that? I said, well, sir, thanks for reading my book. And, he said, thanks, that's all the time I've got. Really. And I went downstairs. I was leaving the Pentagon, and an officer from the Joint Staff called me into his office and said, I want you to know, he said, sir, we're going to attack Iraq. And I said, why? He said, we don't know. He said, I said, well, did they tie Saddam to 9/11? He said, no. He said, but I guess they don't know what to do about terrorism, and so they think, but they can attack states, and they want to look strong, and so I guess they think if they take down a state, it will intimidate the terrorists. And you know, it's like that old saying. He said, if the only tool you have is a hammer, then every problem has to be a nail. Well, I walked out of there pretty upset, and then we attacked Afghanistan. I was pretty happy about that. We should have. And then I came back to the Pentagon about 6 weeks later. I saw the same officer. I said, why haven't we attacked Iraq? We still going to attack Iraq? He said, oh, sir. He says, it's worse than that. He said, he pulled up a piece of paper off his desk. He said, I just got this memo from the Secretary of Defense's office. It says we're going to attack and destroy the governments in 7 countries in 5 years. We're going to start with Iraq, and then we're going to move to Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Iran. I said, 7 countries in 5 years. I said, is that a classified memo? He said, yes, sir. I said, well, don't show it to me. He was about to show it to me. He said, because I want to talk about it. And I sat on this information for a long time, for about 6 or 8 months. I was so stunned by this, I couldn't begin to talk about it. And I couldn't believe it would really be true, but that's actually what happened. These people took control of the policy in the United States. And I realized then, it came back to me, a 1991 meeting I had with Paul Wolfowitz. You know, in 2001 he was Deputy Secretary of Defense, but in 1991 he was the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy. It's the number 3 position in the Pentagon. And I had gone to see him when I was a 1-star general. I was commanding the National Training Center. I had met him one time. He said, if you ever get to Washington, come look me up. They always say that. Well, I was there in Washington. It was a Friday afternoon. I'd visited Colin Powell. He'd given me 5 minutes of his precious time and sent me on my way, and I was bored in the Pentagon, and I thought, I'll just go, who can I see? I think I'll see Wolfowitz. So I called, and up there he was available. Scooter Libby came to the door. I met Scooter for the first time, and he brought me in, and I said to Paul, I said, and this is 1991, I said, Mr. Secretary, you must be pretty happy with the performance of the troops in Desert Storm. And he said, well, yeah, he said, but not really. He said, because the truth is we should have gotten rid of Saddam Hussein, and we didn't. And this was just after the Shia uprising in March of 91, which we had provoked, and then we kept our troops on the sidelines and didn't intervene. And he said, but one thing we did learn, he said, we learned that we can use our military in the region, in the Middle East, and the Soviets won't stop us. He said, and we've got about 5 or 10 years to clean up those old Soviet client regimes. Syria, Iran, Iraq, before the next great superpower comes on to challenge us. And it was like, you know, I'm coming out of the Mojave Desert. I've been training troops. I haven't been thinking geostrategy for some time. And suddenly a guy just sort of shoves this nugget at you. Well, you remember it. It was a pretty stunning thing. You mean the purpose of the military is to start wars and change governments? It's not to sort of deter conflict? We're going to invade countries? And, you know, my mind was spinning. And I put that aside. It was like a nugget that you hold on to. This country was taken over by a group of people with a policy coup. Wolfowitz and Cheney and Rumsfeld, and you could name a half dozen other collaborators from the Project for a New American Century. They wanted us to destabilize the Middle East, turn it upside down, make it under our control. It went back to those comments in 1991. Now, did anybody ever tell you that? Was there a national dialogue on this? Did senators and congressmen stand up and denounce this plan? Was there a full-fledged American debate on it? Absolutely not. And there still isn't. And that's why we're failing in Iraq. Because Iran and Syria know about the plan. All you have to do is read the Weekly Standard and listen to Bill Kristol, and he blabbermouths it all over the world. Richard Pearl the same way. They could hardly wait to finish Iraq so they could move into Syria. It was like a laydown. Oh, our legions are going to go in there. This wasn't what the American people voted George Bush into office. Well, they didn't actually vote him into office, but it wasn't what many of the people who... It wasn't what he campaigned on. He campaigned on a humble foreign policy, the most arrogant foreign policy in American history. He campaigned on no peacekeeping, no nation building, and here he is with Afghanistan and Iraq. It's astonishing. So the root of the problem is not how many troops are in Iraq. Please believe me. Don't be mad, if you're a Democrat, at your Democratic congressman because they can't reduce the troops and frustrate the president. That's not the issue. And if you're a Republican, don't be mad at the Democrats because they're fussing with the troops. Whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, if you're an American, you ought to be concerned about the strategy of the United States in this region. What is our aim? What is our purpose? Why are we there? Why are Americans dying in this region?
So we have been fooled too many times. We can't get fooled again. And as I've pointed out in a previous episode, the Greater Israel Project is no small potatoes, and it may not occur until after the coming of the Messiah for the Jews. Okay, it's really a big deal. It's not about just adding a few thousand acres to Israel's occupied territories in the Golan Heights. No, not at all. And I'm not anti-Semite. I am a Semite. I am of one of the tribes of Israel, of the tribe of Ephraim. My progenitor was Joseph, you know. The guy they sold into Egypt, that dreamer with the fancy psychedelic coat. You know, the guy who made sure his father's family had the best land in Egypt during the famine when he rose up to power in Egypt. You know, that guy. And Greater Israel. Yeah, I mean, any idea what that would mean? I mean, that would mean new borders that would run from Beirut eastwards all the way to Baghdad, and then south along the Euphrates River to the Persian Gulf, swallowing up Kuwait, then west across Saudi Arabia, swallowing up Jordan, and all the way to the Nile, right up by the Sudanese border, then north along the Nile River, and up the Mediterranean coast, swallowing up Palestine, all the way up to Beirut. That would be the Greater Israel that we would be looking at. And do you think, in our geopolitical dynamic right now, do you think just maybe Iran, Saudi Arabia, China, Russia, and maybe even the rest of the civilized world may object to such regional imperialism? But you see how the Luciferian factions want to hijack this Greater Israel project to advance their own agenda of world depopulation. That's what happens when foreign policy is hijacked. Now back to Trump. As I've demonstrated in a previous podcast, there are a lot of Jewish folks in his entourage. I counted at least 40, and I'm positive Mr. Trump understands the dynamic and the implications of his presidency, perhaps better than any of us. And he's not without his enemies, folks. I'm not talking about just the Democrats or the rhinos, you know, that he has set off. He has a lot of enemies. Here's a short list. the drug lords. What more can I say? He has given them an ultimatum. Get out or we'll kick you out. Your days are numbered. Second, Jeff Sessions is going to investigate the Clinton Foundation. There's a lot of people in D.C. that are shaking in their boots right now. The FBI, the Arkansas Field Office, is already going ahead with its investigation on the Clinton Foundation. Number 3, he is going to investigate the email scandal. Need I say more? We need to see those 650,000 emails in Wiener's laptop and the 30,000 emails which went missing, which apparently the NSA has in store. So Hillary had a lot at stake. There was a lot at stake there on this election for her. Because she'll be indicted for treason, obstruction of justice, perjury, just for starters. And she knows that. Her donors know that. Number 4, he's going to drain the swamp, as he said, and that means investigating Pizzagate, the whole blackmail pedophile dynamic that has compromised as much as 70% of our government, by some estimates. It could involve some very high power brokers going all the way up to the Vatican. Then number 5, there's Sheriff Arpaio's investigation of the Obama birth certificate. I know that's kind of minor, but again, there are Obama's backers that are going to be hauled in to testify. His handlers may not like that very much. Soros may not wish to testify. And then number 6, Mr. Trump is going to go after the Federal Reserve Bank. He's going to try and audit it. Do you think that the private, foreign-owned Fed will just roll over? I don't think so. Number 7, he's also going to exterminate ISIS and shut down all the organizations that surreptitiously prop up ISIS in this country. That includes the Islamic organizations like CARE and maybe a lot of mosques. Do you think there's not going to be any pushback on this? Do you think that maybe Soros has not armed and prepared these radical jihadists to spring into action, maybe next spring? And number 8, he's going to repeal a lot of Obama's executive orders, possibly nail Obama for treason, for aiding and abetting ISIS. You just have to watch the video of Obama saying he is training ISIL. That's all the evidence we need. So who knows who's behind all this? Saudi Arabia is definitely going to have a word or two with Trump about exterminating ISIL. Because after all, Saudi Arabia likes to export its hotheads out of the country so it doesn't have a Saudi Spring, right? I mean, come on, connect the dots here. The Wahhabis are in deep, deep doo-doo. They know it. And they can't afford to have another insurrection like Muammar Gaddafi had, or Mubarak had in Egypt, or Assad is having in his backyard. And then we have La Raza and the Mexicans, who are connected to the drug cartels, building a wall. He may be building on one end and they'll be taking it down on the other end. So we'll see. It's going to cause a lot of friction. And number 10, if we're really going to clean up and drain the swamp, he may have to go after James Comey and Loretta Lynch. This is a biggie, it could implicate a lot of people in the FBI. So you see where we're at. How would you like to be in Mr. Trump's shoes? That's why we have to pray for him. Think of David and Goliath. Think of Samson wrestling with a lion. Think of a showdown between the priests of Baal and the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's where Donald Trump is. And if you are an intellectual here who doesn't really believe in God, I don't have time to explain the notion of God here to you, but you can go to Amazon.com And you can read my booklet, which I wrote back in 2000. It's called G is for Gods. And if you have Kindle, you can download it for free. Basically, take evolution to its logical conclusion and you have God. Okay, that's it in a nutshell. Before I forget, let me just say something right away to the party of the KKK, the party that keeps people in plantations in order to rescue them and also stay in power. The party that steals nominations, the party that feeds its candidates all the questions before the debates, the party that destroys ballots and creates civil unrest at rallies, the party that encourages illegals to vote. Here's what I have to say to you. You are finished. You know, I would have to be a lobotomized Neanderthal in a coma to vote for you. In a year from now, you will be just a memory, and besides, who needs parties, okay? Why can't we just get along here, folks? We are, first of all, Americans. Why can't we just vote for the best American patriot? Now, this is the Christmas season when it's more blessed to give than to receive, so I want to share with you an account that has surfaced of Hillary's behavior on the night of her election, the election that never materialized, because sharing is caring, and I have to thank Reverend Austin Miles on iPatriot.com for this tidbit. He says, Hillary Clinton's post-election celebration plans included hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of fireworks, live performances by various celebrities such as Cher, who came believing that Hillary was going to win the election, a $500,000 special effect glass ceiling that she would break through in a dramatic display once she walked out on stage at her headquarters, among millions of dollars worth of other celebratory preparations, all paid for by the Clinton Foundation in full. Now, the most notable damage was located deep in the VIP room of the Clinton camp. A custom 150-inch ultra-high-definition television, a gift from the Saudi Arabian government, was found with a broken screen. The damage was caused by a 950,000 bottle of champagne that was believed to have been thrown at the screen by the former presidential candidate sometime during the election. Early in the morning, the custodial staff was greeted by flipped-over tables as the floors were covered with expensive food, drinks, and appetizers. Broken champagne flutes and gilded silverware were also seen scattered around the would-be party room. And the most telling sign of a massive meltdown was the cake. The pastry that had once proudly displayed the presidential seal was violently flung against the walls in chunks. A broken topper from the cake in the shape of the White House was discovered lodged firmly into the drywall near the dessert table. Yeah. Now, on to other things here. We need to move on. As for this biodegradable organism that was recently interviewed by Oprah, who said that there is no hope left in America, you know, I want to give this message of hope to Mike and Barry this Christmas. I hope they return the two girls, Malaya and Sasha, to their rightful parents, Dr. Anita Blanchard and Martin Nesbitt. And you can check the story on YouTube. Fisher of Men, numeral 3, has the full story. And I hope, for as long as America stands free, we will never again elect a president with a forged birth certificate. And finally, I hope that Marxists like them retire in Venezuela, where they can really see what living without hope feels like. I want you to listen to Obama.
Distinguished guests, and men and women of the finest military in the world. Most of all, Admiral Mullen, Deborah. Michael and I also want to acknowledge your son Jack, who's deployed today. All of you have performed extraordinary service to our country.
Now, the other thing you want to take a look at is this video of Mike at a workout session that was taped at the Helen DeGenerate show. And you gotta wonder, you know, have they ever thought of a jockstrap? I mean, really. I mean, he is swinging back and forth like Big Ben's pendulum. Come on. You know what? I really feel ashamed that we've been so duped all these years as Americans, and we have been tossed over a barrel, blindsided so many times. We had so many false flags, so much theater, and we've done nothing about it. And that's so, so pathetic. See, those are the gauges the globalists look at. They look at how duped down we are, how apathetic we are, how irrelevant we've become as an electorate. And then they do it to us over and over again. Now, Barack Obama will go down in history as the biggest fraud ever perpetrated on the American people. I saw that on Twitter. Those are not my words, and I agree with him. So this is what no holds barred civil conversation is like here. And one final thought, and here we are going to go to literally 200,000 feet. Right after Donald Trump was elected by the electors, some very strange trumpet sounds were heard in the skies around the world. You need to listen to this.
מה אתה זה מגיד? תקשיב. סלם מלמטה. תביא את הטלפון. וואו. וואו, מה זה?
And so, ladies and gentlemen, this Christmas, just keep this in mind. The all and be all, the summum bonum, the elixir of our existence, the Holy Grail, is love. And sometimes we think that love is loving those who are most like us, who are most lovable, but the challenge is to love those who are sometimes not like us and give them chance after chance after chance, like God gives us, until you run out of options and you have to dump them. Sometimes it is all about forgiving. It is all about extending hand of fellowship, an olive branch, sorting out differences, looking for common ground, building bridges. But after you try and try and try, sometimes you have to hit the eject button. And maybe we're at the point right now where God has to hit the eject button on America. That's how close we are. You know, when you listen to those trumpet sounds in the sky, it only tells me one thing. Jesus Christ did come the first time as a humble babe in a manger to show us that status and power mean absolutely nothing in this world if your heart is not as pure and clean as a child's. And he died for us so that our stained hearts could be cleansed by his blood on the cross. But the next time he comes around, which is just around the corner, he will come as King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, and he's going to flush out that filth that is sacrificing children in spirit cooking rituals. And you can take that to the bank, George Soros. You got to pick yourself a big mountain to hide in, because you're going to need one. He's going to come and he's going to whoop your butt. That's all, folks. Enjoy your Christmas. Be safe and don't drink and drive. And don't forget, an obstacle is often a stepping stone, to quote William Prescott. So God bless America. God bless President Donald Trump.